Welcome, colleagues, to KSU's Research with Relevance Friday features. We are back again for a new episode of the Dean's Showcase this semester. We are live streaming this show on KSU TV from Design 2 building on Kennesaw State University's Marietta campus. I am joined today by Dr. Andrew Payne, Dean of the College of Architecture and Construction Management, who will be sharing his research today. My name is Phaedra Corso, and I'm the Vice President for Research here at KSU. And I've been delighted to be the host of this series for, I think we're in our second year. It feels like our 10th, but we're in our second year of the show. And it's been a true pleasure to meet the faculty and the deans now and to learn about their great research. And this, I think, has been a wonderful way for us to connect with each other, particularly across the two campuses. And so I am pleased to be allowed to be here today and doing the show. So a few housekeeping tips before we start. So first, for our live audience, when we open it up to questions from those of you who are attending, you'll notice that there are two mics here up front, and please come on down to the mic and we'll take your question. Second, if you leave the auditorium during this presentation, we ask that you go to the nearest exit in the back and go as quietly as possible. And just note that we're going to ask you not to re-enter because we're trying to be careful about the audio. And then since this is a live stream, this is our chance to now turn off our phones, if you don't mind. Thank you. And then for our virtual audience, you can view this show. If you are watching this show, you are watching through KSU TV. And you can click on the Research with Relevance button on our homepage. If you'd like to submit a question, we've got several different options for you to submit questions from our virtual audience this time. And we felt like last time we didn't have as much participation from the virtual audience, so we wanted to give you a few more options. So this time you can submit a question through KSU's function called Discuss. And you can put in a comment or a question and post as a guest. If you have any problems with this, please Teams message Heather or Joelle, who you can get their contact information either on the slide behind me or on our website. And there's another option for submitting questions, and that is through the research office's email, which is research@kennesaw.edu. Research@kennesaw.edu. And I'm monitoring that right here on my phone, so please feel free to use any approach that you want. Okay, so for everyone, also to let you know that this episode is being recorded, as we've done with all of the episodes we've done to date, and it will eventually be available for viewing for all of your friends and family who are going to want to hear this great show on our Research Office's YouTube channel. Our schedule for the next hour is the following. We're going to first start with a video that we've prepared with the assistance of my staff and others in the room that we'll thank in a moment. We'll watch the video and then we'll start a Q&A with me asking the beginning questions, and then I'm going to look to you all to help me ask some challenging questions of Dean Payne. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce our guest today. So Andrew is an architect, researcher, and spatial designer. He joined KSU in January of 2020 as the Dean of the College of Architecture and Construction Management. His research focuses on the concepts of universal design, which we'll hear a lot about over this next hour, particularly wayfinding and perceptible information. Andrew strives to help architects incorporate clear and concise information through wayfinding strategies. He has more than 12 years of experience in architectural design firms across the Southeast. He's been invited speaker at numerous conferences and contributed to several written bodies of work. Here we go. No, I'll keep going. Prior to KSU, Andrew served as chair and professor at Indiana State University's Department of Built Environment. He worked extensively with the department's assessment and accreditation process. He is a triple Wolfpack alumnus. That sounds painful. Having earned all his degrees, including a PhD in design from North Carolina State University's College of Design. So with that, let's go ahead and roll the video.
My name is Andrew Philip Payne, and I am the Dean of the College of Architecture and Construction Management at Kennesaw State University. In January 2020, I joined the university and the College of Architecture and Construction Management, which is located on the Marietta campus. I've been so grateful for the warm welcome, our strong commitment to student success, and strategic focus on research with relevance. I am honored to serve as the Dean for the College of Architecture and Construction Management, alongside a talented group of faculty, staff, and students. As a college, our enrollment numbers are quickly increasing, which in turn allows for more robust research opportunities. In our college, the faculty and students are conducting applied research at all levels across many areas. Most notable are topics centered on construction materials and methods. My primary research interest is in universal design, a topic I became intrigued with during my undergraduate education. Primarily, I have focused on wayfinding and perceptible information. In short, I believe navigating buildings and spaces should not be considered trivial and should be a smoother process, rather than a frustrating one during an individual's experience within the space. Although my educational focus has been in architecture, I consider myself a designer, creative problem solver, an advocate for making user experiences more enjoyable. Over the last 20 years, I have focused on how users with different abilities can enjoy architecture without obstacles, either physical or mental. My current focus has shifted to public theme parks and venues and event spaces. During the 70s and 80s, a movement began in the United States where architects positioned the government for more protections for people with disabilities. This movement included access to all public spaces and was termed Design for All. As a result, in 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, was signed into law by President George H.W. Bush. This legislation was widely popular across the United States and led the way for many institutions and organizations to pursue research funding and government grants focused on handicapped accessibility. In 1989, while the ADA was being developed and passed into law, the Center for Universal Design at NC State University College of Design was formed. The center took the draft language of the ADA and expanded it to include solid design principles for everyone, not just those with disabilities. The term universal design was born. The Center for Universal Design is where I received my first exposure to how design research makes an impact on people's lives. As an undergraduate student, I participated in a simulation exercise to better understand how poor spatial design inhibits access for certain groups of users. In that case, the users were blind or had low vision. As I continued into my graduate education, my research interest narrowed to one of the 7 principles of universal design. Principle number 4, perceptible information. Having married a graphic designer, I appreciated the importance of clear and concise information and began to recognize how confusing much of the wayfinding and navigation signage was in everyday spaces. In pursuit of how I could help improve wayfinding design standards, I accepted a position as a research assistant in the Center for Universal Design while I completed my PhD. That position allowed me to dive deeper into Universal Design Principle 4 while also conducting accessibility studies of public buildings such as the NC State Legislative Office Building and the NC State Capitol Building in Raleigh, North Carolina. The role of research assistant allowed me to conduct research across many areas of architecture and product design. Specifically, I began looking at public outdoor spaces and conducting observational research and behavior tracking to understand how people move throughout these spaces. This research reflected much of what William White studied in New York City decades earlier. Although I previously relied more on quantitative data, the opportunities to collect and understand qualitative, experiential type data through observations and follow-up surveys was exciting. This gave me the chance to understand how users experience different spaces. It also helped me to identify what some may consider to be good and bad navigational signage flow of space, or wayfinding. As I progressed to the completion of my PhD, I tailored my research question to include two very specific topics: wayfinding and blind or low vision users. The development and refinement of this research area stemmed from observing blind people using long canes to navigate, and in some cases guess their way around unfamiliar spaces. My research grew even more specific by considering how locational information was conveyed to blind users, since better signage was not an option. As such, I began investigating different construction materials used for flooring and sidewalks as a means to indicate arrival, departure, and travel between spaces. My applied PhD field research was a culmination of the previous 10 years of my education, design interest, and desire to create something beneficial for the public. I was able to incorporate quantitative and qualitative data sets, user observations, behavior tracking, and architectural design in the defense and completion of my PhD. I continue to use my research experiences in my teaching and consulting roles, and I have developed the Sight, Sound, and Movement Accessibility Workshop, which is stemmed from my undergraduate simulation experiences. I have led this workshop in various forms at multiple U.S. universities and internationally in Japan, Thailand, and England. In my faculty role, I always seek opportunities for students to conduct research and incorporate the results into their designs for their design build projects, architecture thesis development, and the design thinking cycle. I firmly believe that people can better themselves by learning through doing. As my mentor, Dean Marvin Malika, is quoted as saying, "All design begins with the dance of life." Loosely interpreted, echoes again that design can and should be a reaction to the needs of the person. In the short time I have been at KSU, I have had the opportunity to advise an undergraduate research team who focused on what effects COVID-19 had on the design studio culture. Part of their research looked at the student users, the design studio space, and whether social distancing affected their learning abilities. Again, evaluating qualitative data from users and their perception of the use of space. As Dean, I have the privilege to review and support innovative research projects developed by the faculty, much of which is generated in the classroom by engaging students in the process. One example is the Precast Concrete Institute grant, led by Professors Liz Martin, Giovanni Loretto, and Jeffrey Collins. Students are able to work in a hands-on environment with raw materials, industry professionals, and faculty experts to learn, understand, and test the precast concrete in various designs. As a design consultant, I am engaged with a theme park in Tennessee to evaluate their accessible trails and wayfinding signage. This is an exciting opportunity as it will encompass both tracking and mapping, as well as proposing new design ideas and options. This type of project is ideal as I get to employ both my research and design skills throughout the project. With these experiences, I most enjoy the brainstorming and problem solving of research. Now, as a dean, providing opportunities to that in a collaborative environment will better prepare our KSU students for whichever field they choose in the architecture or construction management industries.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Great.
Do you know why I love doing this show so much? Because every time I hear someone tell us about their research and the passion they have for their research, it makes me want to do that research too, right? And I just think how inspirational you are for students who hear your journey and who want to do what you do. So
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for that video. It was wonderful. So I have about 1,000 questions, and they're all over the place. But I don't think you all want to hear me ask questions the whole time. So again, I'm encouraging you to come up to the mics. But I'm going to start off with a couple of questions that you and I did not rehearse, just to spice it up a little bit. Okay? So my first question for you is, I'm a world traveler. And I want to know from you, what are the top cities that you would recommend for urban planning and design, specifically around principle number 4, which is your area of research?
Great question, and yeah,
Of course, and that's why I'm the host.
yeah. If we could have rehearsed this, I could have given you a list of 30. But yeah, top 10 list. You know, I would probably start with London. London, England has a fantastic community relationship with the designers of the city. They do a great job of signage. They use graphics. They use different material changes. Everything that I talk about being information that is perceived by the different users, they engage all of them as much as possible. Public transportation, public buildings, some of the private buildings, activities, tourist engagements. London does by far the best job I've ever seen. Similar to that, Prague in the Czech Republic. This is an interesting one, a medieval city. It's got quite a bit of history that wasn't pleasant, but you know, they're an up and coming, I say up and coming, in the sense that they are modern, they're progressive, they're very active, and they do a really good job as well. And you got to keep in mind that, you know, the Czech language is not a very common language, so not only do they do a very good job for the local population, but it's a very well-traveled city, and so they do a very good job of communicating in multiple languages, and then in the most common language, which is the visual, right? So they provide a lot of graphics, a lot of communication that way, and those are probably my top 2 favorites. We are starting to see a lot more successes here in the United States as well. I think Miami is probably at the top of my list here for the U.S. And for it to be a tourist attraction from around the world, they still do a very good job of it not being overly visually cluttered with signage and wayfinding. They do a very good job of identifying landmarks throughout the city, which once you get to that landmark, then they do a smaller level scale of helping you travel around and find your way that way. So let's start with 3, right?
Okay,
Those 3 is what
perfect.
I'd give you. Yeah.
Perfect. So now I'm going to ask you to concentrate on Atlanta.
Okay.
Or Greater Atlanta. So you've not been here for too long, but you've been here long enough to experience several public spaces. What would you put as a good public space in terms of signage, and then maybe one that could use a little bit of help?
Okay, sure. So why don't we go with very appropriate asking this. I think the Battery does a very good job. The local area with the number of people that come in there usually for the first time have a very good success of finding their way around to what they need to see in that area, including the difficulty of typically navigating a professional league baseball park. The park has done a really good job of including signage and travel guides there. But I would also say for the locals that visit there routinely, the design and layout of the space is comfortable enough to where they don't need a lot of excessive signage. They can find their way just because of the location of a building or the way it's positioned, the design of it to be unique from the one next to it. So I think the Battery is a very good example of what's been done right. And as far as the ones that are challenges, as much as I know the Olympic Park downtown was a success when it was here and active and going, I think over time it's kind of lost its purpose as far as communication or wayfinding and describing to the people that come visit that space as to what's going on. I think it's a bit out of date and could be refreshed.
Okay, so that brings me to the next question, which is, do the techniques that you employ in wayfinding, I assume they're changing over time as technology advances? So that's my first part of the question. And my second part of the question is, do you find that certain technologies, techniques, or mechanisms are better by age? So in other words, do we see that young people are looking for something different than someone who's not so young?
Okay. Yeah, that's a very interesting
Excellent question. Yes.
Excellent and interesting, right? You can't be offended by interesting, I think. The interesting thing about that is technology and the information that we're sharing on our devices nowadays is becoming a universal language for so many people. So emojis, emoticons, imagery, that, the little yellow face with the two eyes. I mean, you can type it on a keyboard, you can get it on your phone, you can put it on the computer. We see it around the city. So I think that the sheer use of graphics nowadays is becoming a standardized language for a lot of people, regardless of their age. And it is probably one of the most easily communicable, right? So where we've done really good in the past with text on a different colored background to give you contrast, the text may be now a secondary or tertiary level of communicating, where the graphic is now a primary means, both digital and still in print or signage. So yeah, I think, I don't know that it's changing over the time. I think we're getting better at understanding it. And so the graphic is still a very creative way to do it.
So now let me ask you to focus on the Marietta campus.
Okay.
And I'm sure you've looked around at some of the architecture and wayfinding opportunities or challenges that we have here. And without getting anyone too angry, and I don't know if our VP of Facilities is in the room.
She's right there.
Okay. So,
Perfectly in my line of sight, so yeah.
So I don't know if we should pull that question back or not, but we'll see how you answer that one, Andrew.
Well, again, a very good question. So here on the Marietta campus, is there anything that I could see being redesigned or improved upon? I'm probably a very, my wife will love this, I'm very critical, right? I tend to critique everything at all times. And part of my daily routine here on campus is moving between buildings, talking to people in different spaces, visiting students in the classrooms and studios. And so, yes, I'm constantly critiquing what can we do better to, when we bring in a potential student or a family or a guest to campus, to help them make their way around campus without being lost or confused or showing up to the wrong classroom on the first day, or just not communicating, not miscommunicating, but just sheerly not miscommunicating. And to be honest with you, I think this is just the nature of every day always trying to be able to do something better, no matter where you go, whether it be a university campus, an office building, a playground in a city park. There's always opportunities that we can see, well, if they would have just done this better, then this whole new user group may have been able to experience it in a different way. So yeah, I would say, to be fair, there's probably always opportunities. And I'm probably the one that's the most keen aware of it, because honestly, I look for them. I'm the one that goes into a movie theater and can tell you how many exits and where they are and how to get to them. And that's just what I do. And I do that at the level of design everywhere I go and every space I visit. So yeah, I'm fun at parties. So yeah.
And your spouse does the same thing. I just would love to be a fly on the wall at dinner.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask about your college.
Sure,
Your college is construction management and architecture. And I'm going to be honest, I don't quite know what the difference between those two fields are. And so when you have prospective students who are interested in your college, how do you all make that distinction between the two fields?
Sure.
And is there an overlap in any of the coursework or even the skill set that they're trying to acquire?
Yeah, and this is going to be my simple answer to it. Architecture, I try to explain to people that have no idea of what it really is. That's the design of buildings and spaces and things. Construction management is exactly what it says, the construction of the building and overseeing of projects, typically from beginning to end, whether it's a new building, new bridge, new highway, or a renovation, or even the management of facilities. So two completely different things. One is design, typically on paper in model form, is architecture. Construction management is understanding the processes to get something built, typically, right?
How is that different than engineering?
Engineering looks at a lot of different factors of the performance of buildings, roadways, bridges, things of that nature, where construction management is taking the bits and pieces and putting it together, understanding the process to look at labor, cost, manpower, materials, time, site, all of that, and know how the puzzle goes together. Can have good foresight of what the project should be like at the end, at any point in the middle, time-wise, money-wise,
And how
cetera.
does that intersect with what Kohl's does in management?
Oh, goodness. There's a lot of overlap. Project management is something that's very common between many of the majors and programs here on the campus at KSU. So Kohl's management program may have a lot of very similar features and ideas behind what our construction management does. It may just be managing different things. But the idea of project management and understanding budget and time and schedule, I think all of that falls under the big umbrella of management, right? We just happen to be focused in the construction of buildings or sites and projects. So the pieces are a little bit different, right? Now, you asked if there's any overlap between architecture and construction management. My firm answer is there needs to be, right? Whether it's a shared class between the two majors or shared opportunities such as student projects or student competitions, there has to be that overlap. In the practicing world, you have to do that every day. Not one person works alone on a project from beginning to end, the design and the construction of it. There's always teamwork, sharing ideas, bringing ideas to the table, but also learning from each other and just good communication. So yes, within our college, we're working on that. I think it's something that we need to do a lot more. I think the students would enjoy sharing ideas across disciplines. And I think we could even bring in the other colleges here, engineering, computer science and software engineering, even pull some of the colleges from the Kennesaw campus together. Yeah, so I think that's where we are, and we are trying to emulate what happens in the practicing world every day.
All right, I'm going to go back to your research. So
Okay.
you talk about your emphasis on number 4 of universal design. I don't know what number 1 through 3 or beyond 4 principles are.
Sure.
Do you?
Do I? That's a
No,
Good
it's not a
question.
yes or no. It's what are they is the question.
it's a list of 7, and then
Oh, so we're testing your knowledge.
you really are
here.
testing me, yeah. So, equitable use is one, right? So that means if I'm left-handed and you're right-handed, we should still be able to use some of the items or products the same way, right? Equitable and use, so that's 2. Size and space for approach and use. Sounds simple, a lot of words there. Take, for example, in this auditorium that we're sitting in, there's not a bench down here on the front row. Well, that means you can't sit there. No, that's intended for somebody in a wheelchair. They can have a seat in the front row. Or if it's a parent with a stroller, they can sit here in the front row. And there's also a bench there to where they can be with a companion. So if my companion's in a wheelchair, I sit on the bench, they roll up next to me. Now we've got a good seat. And typically they would have access to the top row. And if it was a flat floor, we would have seats throughout. So size and space for approach and use, right? So also, we can add on to size and space by saying, where there's doorways, and if I'm in a wheelchair and I'm in a large wheelchair because I'm a larger person, is there enough room for me to navigate in and out of that room without, blockading myself or getting stuck in a hallway, right? So there's got to be enough space for me to use it appropriately. Let's see, you've got me tripped up here now. That's a couple of them. Wow, you really did stump me.
Let me ask another
Sure.
question. So you focus on vision as a disability of interest. Are there certain pockets of disabled populations that you find that are least helped when it comes to architectural design and where there could be improvements made?
Definitely. I think right now, and what's been probably the last several decades, I think it's the elderly. And I would say not that they're a large class that are all categorized as disabled. I think that their abilities change over time. And so once you get to a certain point, your abilities can change daily. And I think we're not doing enough to design more comfortably for that age group. Now, there is another very interesting group, which I think is a positive direction that we can go in. We're doing so much with prosthetics for people that are amputees that once they get their prosthetics, they now have to learn a whole new process and way to move about and be mobile. And we're not taking that group, and the numbers growing quickly. because of the tremendous research and production that we're able to do. That's a group that hasn't been looked at enough, I think, because we can do some fantastic things to help them with that transition back to better mobility, right? So they've taken the big first step in getting the prosthetics
Yeah.
and trying to learn and how to use them. Now we can incorporate design into making that part of their positive experience.
I am currently blinded by the lights, but I'm pretty sure Dean Swan is in the room, so I hope you hear that for your master's program. I think
Yeah,
that would
good.
be a great addition. I don't know if you all remember, but you are to ask questions as well as me. So please come on down to the mics when you can think of that burning question, and I will continue on. So I am interested in going back to the students. So you in the video you talk about that you're working with a group of undergraduate students. Is that typical for undergraduates to be engaged in research in either program, construction management or in architecture? Do you have a master's program? And is it necessary for a student to get a master's degree to be competitive within these fields?
Okay, good. There's a lot there, all unpacked in a certain order. We have an undergraduate in architecture, which is a 5-year bachelor's of architecture, and that's a professional degree. So a student that completes that has completed the educational requirement to become a licensed architect. There's still the exam and the internship they have to do. So for architecture, a master's degree isn't required, as long as you complete the professional bachelor's degree. Now in construction management, we have a 4-year bachelor's degree, and then we also have a master's of science in construction management. Students are doing a fantastic job right now moving into the workforce after their 4-year degree. The ones that are pursuing the master's degree are becoming even more understanding of very specific pieces of information in construction management, and they're doing tremendous as well. I'm trying to think of where you started with it. You started with the undergraduate research. The 5-year bachelor's of architecture degree culminates in a thesis semester. So that is a very rigorous process. I would say that process of the student defining the project, the scope, the client, the site, the program, all of that is well-founded in what could be considered rigorous research. For construction management, their culminating project is a capstone project. Typically, an entire project management package for a building, typically a building, including schedule, site, safety, budget, time, people, manpower, everything. So both of them have very engaged learning opportunities in those capstone or thesis projects. The student project you talked about, with me being the faculty advisor for them, this was a part of the undergraduate research club. The group came to me and sought me out as an advisor because they tied their research topic of, does COVID-19 affect studio learning, or did it? They tied that in with my understanding of wayfinding and spaces. And so that was extracurricular, I would say. The students chose to spend their time and efforts in that research project. They did a great job. They presented it at the national conference. And I think it was a great experience for them as well. So I think they're looking forward to doing that again. So, yeah.
Great. So tell me a little bit about your work with the amusement park. That fascinates me.
Sure,
So
sure.
when they hire you to be a consultant, what is the first thing you do? You walk around and see what's going on, and then what do you present to them as the product?
Yeah, so I'll give you a scenario of how this could go. The way that this project's been laid out is, I would go visit. Essentially, I would spend a day being a guest.
Do you
right?
go on the rides?
For this particular project, I wouldn't, just because that doesn't tie into what I'm doing. But I would want to experience what a guest would, right? A paying guest.
And they go on the rides.
Food locations, the restrooms, all the fun stuff, right? Walking through the park, finding where the lines are, what's the access to, medical services if I get hurt. Those types of things is what I'm looking for as if I'm a typical guest. My next visit back would be access to parts of the park or site that others can't go to. So behind the scenes of the food areas, the food court, maybe the pathways that service workers have to traverse in order to get from one point of the park to the next. Because I'm looking at ways that a user, being a staff member, a guest, or a participant, is going to have to navigate around the site. And what are some of those obstacles, right? Is it, in order to get from here to there, there's only a set of stairs, so anybody that's got a mobility issue of climbing stairs up or down, that's not an optional path for them. So I'm going to say, okay, that one's no longer available, so it's going to add 5 minutes of my walking path to get to the other side of the park, right? So I want to be able to communicate back with the park operators to let them know, okay, if X, Y, and Z happens, this person is going to have this type of experience, poor or positive, right? And usually my follow-up visits will be to observe the users in their space. So I may follow somebody around the park for an hour, right? Very conspicuously, right?
Here we go. This is another whole topic.
Yeah. But very conspicuously, because I want to say, okay, they walked and walked and walked, but then they turned around twice because they didn't go in the right direction. That may tell me that signage is bad, or they could have changed their mind, but whatever they wanted wasn't that way. So I'll make a couple notes on the map after I'm tracking them, and that'll make me go back and maybe revisit that area. And if I notice that 5 people turned around in this one area, that's giving me a little bit more information to say something here is not right. Either the map they're looking at, or the app they're looking at, or the signage that they're looking at, something is a little bit off. So I try to experience from, like I said, a guest patron to a worker to, somebody from the outside just observing.
So have you ever had the case where you've provided what you consider to be, the best plan, and your client says that's a no-go because of costs?
I've had the no-go come back not because of cost, just because they hired us to do the research because they needed it done legally. It was a public building, so they had to have it on record. And they went with the easiest solution just to get it done. So that's a little bit disappointing because, as a designer, I think that my design is going to be much better a solution than something you just buy off the shelf, right? And most designers have that opinion of themselves. And in fact, I think it would have enhanced the space and experience a lot more. So to know that, they just took the report, put it on a shelf, and then bought the easy way out is not very exciting, but it's okay. It happens.
I've had the same thing happen to me too, so I understand.
Sure.
All right, I swiveled my head and now I see Paola's at the mic. Go ahead, Paola.
Am I supposed to introduce myself also?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. I am Paola Spolitini, a professor of software engineering and interim associate dean for research for the College of Computing and Software Engineering. So you talk a lot about user experience, right? And this is a very important thing also for software, right? We do a lot of user experience in software. And this last example, this last question from Fedra about amusement park is very similar to software, because my feeling is that you can go around, do this observation, and propose change that are actually feasible. But how this same process apply in an historic city, let's say Venice, or let's say Milano? I'm Italian, you might guess from the accent. So how this historic barrier coming to your way, and how do you fix the threshold? Because, I know this process is already difficult enough, and I cannot imagine, dealing with Venice and what people care about, that cannot be changed. Yeah. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, and thank you for the question. I love this question because you touch on 2 things very dear to me. Obviously, the wayfinding, the signage, the imagery, but also historic architecture. If you're talking about specifically Venice or any other historic equivalent, that's a tough balance you've got to keep, right? Because we don't want to deface the beautiful architecture and experience that the historic city brings by plastering imagery and bright signage all over the place, right? So we definitely don't want to do that. But I do think that there's a minimal way that we can still convey the information, be it very strict signage guidelines that have a reflective design of what the background may be. So if you're in a historic city, perhaps there is a color scheme and a font and a material that will blend in nicely. That way you still convey the information, but you don't do it in a way that's, you know, a yellow hazard sign on the side of the road. We don't want that, right? So I do think that, you know, that's why you always relate to professional designers, right? Bring in an architectural historian, bring in a graphic designer, bring in an environmental graphic designer, put them all together and say, okay, we've got a lot of very important challenges that we have to meet. We need the wayfinding, but we can't just, you know, paint green arrows on the side of a building, right? So we do have to keep a balance. And so bringing in the right players that understand which priorities are first, I think that would be the best way to do it. Certainly I don't have an answer to that problem, but, you know, I'd rather be on a team of 5 other people anyway. I usually don't work by myself. I usually call on other people that have the skills that I don't, right? So
Great.
that's how we do it, yeah.
Thank you. Another question?
First, thank you for coming to College of Architecture.
I think you'll speak a little bit louder.
Okay. Thank you for coming to the College of Architecture, and thank you for this program. So, Dean, I was enjoying from the presentation,
Good.
and it is my first time understanding about your research.
Sure.
I've been in 2 relevant research: Walk Score by Google, and Urban Walkability Index,
Yeah.
which was a Singaporean project. Now they assessed many cities around the globe, and they have a report for every city on walkability index. Wayfinding is one of the subcategories with 9 subsidiary criteria. So now one of the trending requests we are receiving is public health for wayfinding.
Yes.
Because of COVID-19.
Mhm.
And we've currently, you know, we are publishing a kind of special issue in AC Journal of Urban Planning for the same topic.
Sure.
So now I want to get from your insight, I want to get your insight about this current topic, which is relevant to COVID-19.
Okay.
Thank you.
First of all, I appreciate bringing in the walkability, right? Because that index, the rating really does make a difference when clients or owners of spaces or even municipalities are looking at new urban design plans or new building construction, site location, building placements. They consider the walkability index quite a bit, right? Because it talks about how comfortable, how familiar, how likely access is for the walking person, and that's important because we're trying to cut down on many other factors, right? So I would say, you know, looking at COVID, right, which obviously deals with separation of people, limits people in spaces, all of these different factors that we always took for granted, never considered what life would be like without them. When we're talking about certain buildings with certain programs or activities in them, I think when you consider the impact of COVID in those spaces, you have to really understand a little bit better about who the users are and what the activities are. And one of the big areas, I know Phaedra and I talked about it earlier, was the study of waiting areas in hospitals or the queuing lines of people waiting to be seen for medical reasons, and how that, the spatial layout, the separation of people, the social distancing, the separation of well versus sick, all of these different criteria that goes in. I think that's very important. And it becomes obviously more and more difficult every time you add a new layer of variable to the design question, right? If you're talking about just a room like this and you've got one group here and one group there in the audience, you know, it's pretty clear what the layout or separation is going to be. But when you're talking about a room where an infection can be airborne, how do you determine where people are separated and how far, and what the layout of the space needs to be? What's the seating conditions that need to be? What's the in and out travel routes? It does become very interesting, and it becomes very challenging. And again, going back to the previous question, it's not a one-person design solution, right? We need to have everybody that has an investment in that problem to be at the table to find a solution. I don't know if that directly addresses what you talked about, But that's the first thing that came to mind is when you start separating people, looking at the different activities that need to happen, and then you put COVID on top of it, it just exponentially difficults the problem. So.
Thank you. We've got several questions that are rolling in
Oh,
virtually.
goodness.
So here we go. This is from Mark Guile in the Wellstar College. He says, excellent work. I appreciate you mentioning individuals with limb loss. Do your research and project teams ever include clinicians and end users to help understand the unique needs of populations like this?
Yeah, and again, I go back repeatedly to say you need to build the team around you of people that are invested, right? So end users is always going to be number one in my research looking at the use of space, right? The space isn't used unless people are there using it, right? So I can design a beautiful space, but it's really not successful unless people are there using it appropriate ways. And so looking at end users, the potential users of the space, whomever it may be, they need to be included. Certainly clinicians, you talked about limb loss. I think not only the person with limb loss, but people that are around them routinely to be a part of that team, I think is very important, right? Because it could be a caretaker, or it could just be a significant other, could be a family member or a friend. We all have to participate in that activity together. So having them part of a research team and a solution team, I think is going to be critical. Yeah, certainly.
Thank you. Here's another one. I'm watching the Research with Relevance live stream. My question is regarding consultation with the amusement park. Do you ever find yourself with conflicts between designing for user experience and safety? If so, how do you reconcile that conflict?
Oh, that's a tough one. I could see where it would come into play often. I'm trying to think back to my mind a little bit, any of the projects I've worked on, if that's been an issue. Nothing comes to mind where I've personally experienced that. I've been in some downtown urban spaces that are closed off for events or like summer festivals. And so what's typically a driving path of a road for cars is now where people are all day, and those become a little bit tricky because I'm thinking to myself, this isn't an activity that typically takes place here, right? So downtown Savannah, where I used to live, a lot of cobblestone roads, people are out there dancing after having a few drinks, and in my mind it's like, well, these couple of three things don't go well together. And so I would say safety is always an issue or always present, but it typically isn't at the top of my research agenda. I think it's kind of an undercoating that's always there, but it's like, well, okay, let's look at the topic at hand. So yeah, that could be a new topic that's a focus for sure.
Did you build your own home?
I have not yet. I think every designer or anybody that's in any realm of architecture usually wants to design and build their own home. It was an arduous process to buy something here in Georgia.
That's why I asked.
And after a year or so of finally buying a house, I kicked myself for not just spending the time to build. I think we all want to, and I get asked that question a lot. But
and please invite me over when you do build
sure,
that home.
Sure.
Here's another question that's come in. Thank you for the great, this is from Pega. Thank you for the great discussion.
Oh, good. Hey, Pega.
Being blind or visually impaired requires frequently touching surfaces in a daily life, therefore potentially increasing the COVID exposure. In such context and given the new challenges that COVID-19 poses, and I think this is similar to your question, for the blind community, in your view, what could be the new innovative opportunities, tools for creating effective, inclusive, and universal design?
Yeah, I like that, and there has been some research done in this area pre-COVID, and that was with blind or low vision users that have diabetes because they often lose senses in their haptic abilities and tactile, and so I think that we could probably parallel some of that research with the loss of touch or the loss of sensation in people that have diabetes with a similar parallel research in how do you get sensations from touch without actually touching and being exposed to an infectious disease. I don't know an answer, but I like the idea that that could be a new whole category of research, right? It's a topic that I don't know is currently being done, but if not, that's a good area.
Interdisciplinary research with relevance.
Sure,
I
sure.
love it. I'm going to ask you a question I've asked everyone, I think, that's been on this program, which is, if you had $1 million or some amount more than that,
Sure.
what would you want to do with it in terms of research?
Sure. You know, a vision that I have for the college is to enhance our research output. And I think that can be done the best way through engagement through students and the community. And so I would see the development of a research center within the college that has a direct connection to nonprofits, low income, clients that need some input before they pursue professional services. So, you know, something that has a direct connection back to the local community. Maybe it's a quick design of a neighborhood park for, you know, a downtown area that doesn't yet have the funding, but there's a site available, and if we can help them with the design of it, perhaps they can go out and get some funding support. I think if we had more of those opportunities, not only would the student engagement learning improve, but they would have a much closer connection to the immediate community around our campus. And I don't think it takes $1 million to do that. I think it takes a little bit, and it takes a lot of time and commitment from the faculty and staff and people engaged is really where it is. But I would take the $1 million
And use it well.
and use it well. That's right. So I do think that's something that I see in the vision of the college in the near term. I would love to be able to go down that path. I know that engaged learning is something very important to us. I know our students enjoy participating at that level. Both architecture and construction management enjoy that. And I think it's a service that we could provide to the community that would be well received.
I agree. And it ties in nicely with our R2 roadmap and our expanded roadmap that's coming soon.
That's right. That's
So
right.
that's wonderful. Any other questions from the audience? Well, at last chance, I see people like struggling. Maybe they're going to get up. No. Okay. So I just want to say it's been a joy.
Yeah, thank you.
Your research is really exciting. We're excited to have you here at KSU. I can see that you're going to do some amazing things.
Great.
So thank you for that. So let me go ahead and thank our guests. Let's give our guest one more round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody coming out and being online. I appreciate it. You know, it's one of those things where we need to have a lot more dialogue back and forth. This is a little bit dramatic for me, but I definitely think we need to have this more often. Thank you all.
We love the drama of this show. And so I also want to thank my staff who, honestly, I don't do anything but show up. The rest of my staff is the one that really makes this happen. And so a big, huge, heartfelt thank you to my staff that's here. I'm looking at them, Heather and Joelle and Tom Boyle, who's maybe here, but also involved in creating the video. And then if you haven't met our wonderful folks in the back, that's the Broadcast and Event AV staff in KSU's Department of Event and Venue Management. And we've gotten to know them this semester, and they really do an excellent job. And for that $1 million donation, can we build them a studio?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I said that last time, but we really need to get them a studio. I'm excited to tell you that we have one more Dean's Showcase this semester. And the lineup has changed slightly, but we're pretty excited that we will be featuring Dean/Provost Ivan Pulinkala will be our featured guest in December. And that should be pretty fun, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And so with that, we say from the Office of Research, thank you. Have a safe, wonderful, happy weekend, and we'll see you next time.